My wife and I were high school sweethearts. We were married shortly after she graduated from the police academy. I became an electrician. Our marriage was wonderful at first. I loved my wife's ability to operate as a respectable cop and honorable wife at home. She never let her ego go to her head, and she still allowed me to be the leader in our relationship. Over the next 10 years of marriage, we had one son. By this time, my wife was very comfortable in her role as a cop. She joined social media, updating her followers on a daily basis about her assignments and days spent monitoring civilians. When she was younger, she never wore makeup and hardly took the time to do her hair. One morning, I noticed the change in her routine. After eating breakfast and drinking coffee with me, she'd spend an hour and a half getting ready, which included her hair and makeup. I heard her phone pinging several times. We'd been married for more than a decade at this point, so I didn't feel right asking her for her phone. Instead, right before she walked out the door, I asked her who was messaging her while she got ready. She was really surprised I even asked. She said it was her sister. That was odd because her sister hadn't spoken to her in years. Due to some petty disagreement she couldn't let go. So I expressed my surprise and asked if they had made up now. She reluctantly told me they had, and everything was all good. Well, that was hard to believe, but I didn't see why my wife would lie to me. Still, I considered finding her sister on social media to ask her if this was the case. I got busy at work when I got a phone call from the local police department. This was bad. I instantly believed my wife had been injured on the line of duty. I answered it, my heart already racing. They told me my wife had been arrested. This was really bad, just not in the way I thought at first. I went to the police station where I was told the story and showed video surveillance. They played the video first because it was easier than trying to tell me what they saw. My wife pulled her cruiser into the parking lot of our son's elementary school. She got out and watched the children play from a distance. They were probably too far away for her to spot our son in particular. Then, a second car pulls up. A man gets out, and my wife rushes into his arms. It's as if they are meeting for the first time or the first time in a while. They almost immediately start making out, and I can't believe what I'm seeing. They don't care that they're in public, let alone the parking lot of a school, with children playing a short distance away. AP is grabbing her, but before they stop, and she drags him by the hand into the back seat of her cruiser, leaving one door wide open, probably so they wouldn't be trapped in the back seat. Once the car got rocking, the back door shut. They were locked in the back seat of the cruiser. Fast forward just over an hour later, when additional police show up and open the back door for them to get out. I couldn't be sure, but this had to be the worst moment in my wife's entire life. This was the worst moment of my life. Finding out that she had cheated on me so shamelessly at an elementary school while acting as an officer of the law. All of my respect and adoration for my wife dissipated. I felt alone, lost, and foolish. I wanted to hold my son, which made me wonder how long my wife would be in jail. The officers didn't know. All they knew so far was that she was being charged with public lewdness, indecent exposure, and disorderly conduct. Her life would never be the same. I got to see her hours later, and I didn't have to say a word. She broke down, telling me how sorry she was. She said she'd started messaging AP online, and today was the day they decided to meet in person. She said she never thought it was going to escalate the way it did, but I told her to shut up and stop making excuses. She started an affair that she decided to consummate seconds after meeting the man. This was not the behavior of a respectable, knowledgeable police officer, wife, and mother. This was the behavior of a sleazy girl that didn't know any better. I told her how disappointed I was that our marriage was over, and that's when I started crying. All the time and feelings I had for her were wasted. The marriage I wanted to last a lifetime was over, suddenly. I would become a single father. When I left the room, my wife was only a shell of the woman she was. I filed for divorce while she served time in prison. I gained full custody of our son. After my ex was released from prison, she started visitation with him. I could tell that after doing time, she was only thankful. She was so relieved to be free and able to see her son. She deeply apologized to me again for cheating, but I told her it was in the past now. I also found a woman worthy of a serious relationship. Believe me, I was skeptical, but her actions and the way she lived her life showed me that she wasn't the kind to underestimate the purity and sanctity of marriage. Her husband had passed away unexpectedly, which was why she was single. She hadn't slept with anyone after him. We waited until our wedding night to love each other in that way. My ex, on the other hand, was too thirsty for this traditional behavior. For months after being released from prison, she became pregnant. I was shocked because she used to be so responsible and on birth control. Of course, this man didn't want to be a father and hardly knew her, but they are still trying to co-parent while my ex continued dating. She claims to be searching for a husband, but she continues advertising herself online and sleeping with men she likes. It's no wonder why they don't see her as wife material. Here's a humorous update that just reassures me I was right to handle things the way I did. My ex then tried to seduce me one of the times I was picking up her son, even though I was married. Your wife had her dream life, a loving husband, a respectable career, and a child. It's hard to believe she went so far as to start talking to another man behind your back while playing house and pretending everything was fine. Then she actually thought it was a good idea to meet AP at a school while she was on duty. As if that isn't bad enough, she decides to make out with him and have sex in public in the back seat of a car that can and did lock them inside. How embarrassing and shameful. And I'll still bet that women on social media would flock to support her and say she was within her rights to do what she did. People are loony, willing to defend anything. It seems like this was the start of the downfall in her life, because decisions she made after her release weren't any better. Anyways, thank you for sharing this with us. Now let's move on to our next story for today. Then how much I would fall for her. She was so kind, sweet, and shy. She didn't have social media apps, and she was extremely book smart. She was pretty plump, but she looked really good. I wasn't in it for looks, though. I knew better than to fall for any basic woman. At dinner, we really hit it off. We had a lot in common, and she seemed down to earth. I asked her out on a second date, and the rest is history. Eventually, she started hanging out with me in my dorm, and it was only a matter of time before she met my roommate. She was only shy around him, staying close to me whenever he was there. We would occasionally go out with a group of friends to have some fun, and the longer we spent together, the more she opened up to the friends we socialized with. She started to find her circle and connect with other women. That's when she joined a social app and added virtual friends. Around the same time, she started working out. At this point, we'd been in a serious relationship for 3 years, and we graduated. We got married around the same time my wife reached her goal weight. Her confidence and number of friends had tripled since the day she met me. I loved her with all my heart, and I was ready to be with her and only her for the rest of my life. She said she felt the same. After work one day, I made plans to meet my brother at a bar. I was under the impression that my wife was at home. As soon as I walked in the place, I spotted my wife. She was sitting at a table with my roommate from college. I hadn't spoken to him since before we graduated. I didn't even look for my brother. I just walked straight over to them. When my wife looked at me, her expression turned to humiliation. But within a moment, it changed to calm and defensive, like she already had a plan to explain all this away. I was right, because as soon as I asked what the heck was going on, she said they were just 2 friends out for a drink to catch up. My roommate could hardly look at me. He was trying to copy her calm expression, but he wasn't very good at it. I asked him to explain this, and he just shrugged and tried to play it off like she asked him to meet up with her as old friends. I wasn't buying it. I asked how often they messaged each other, and she was quick to tell me that it had been at least a year since they spoke. AP looked guilty and tried to play dumb while he agreed with her. This just didn't feel right. Then my wife tried to say I was jealous and insecure, because she would never do anything to betray the sanctity of our marriage. My brother approached the table and asked if everything was okay. I told him it wasn't, and I'd have to meet up with him another day because I needed to take my wife home. She was beside herself, extremely upset and irritated with me and the whole situation, but she still grabbed her purse and apologized to AP before getting up and leaving with me. At home, we had a big fight because she really believed I was at fault for not wanting her to meet up with AP without telling me. I asked her to give me her phone, and that's when things went bad. She started packing a bag dramatically, like my request was the last straw. Just before it was filled, she broke down crying without a word from me. She asked me why we had to do this, and I told her it was because she wouldn't see things my way. My way being that, hanging out with my old roommate behind my back and refusing to show me her phone was unacceptable. She finished packing, making sure her phone was in her back pocket, before telling me she was going to stay at her aunt's house. I told her if she left, it would most likely be the end of our marriage because I didn't believe she was really going there. She was just appalled, but still refused to give me her phone, and so she felt like she had no choice but to leave. 20 minutes later, I drove to her aunt's house, and she was not there. Her aunt had no idea what I was talking about or where my wife would be. I sat in the car on my phone and looked up my old roommate. I messaged one of our mutual friends from college and asked if he knew where AP moved to. I explained some of the situation, and that was enough for him to give me his address. My wife's car was parked outside when I got there. I was about to knock on the front door, but I heard noises from the backyard. The house was surrounded by dense woods. It felt like my heart was about to explode when I saw them having sex. There was an in-ground hot tub right beside them, so I ran up at full speed and shoved AP into it. I thought about grabbing my wife and dragging her back to the car, but I had a moment of clarity. She chose to come here and cheat on me, instead of giving me her phone and admitting what had been going on. This was more than enough of a reason never to speak to her again. I decided I'd done enough, and found out what I needed to know. She was absolutely shocked and hysterical. She wasn't really crying tears, but she tried to sound like she was upset or crying. She asked me what the heck I was doing, as if all this was my fault. I could not believe it. Then, as I started walking back to my car, she screamed for me to stop and come talk to her. She actually wanted me to talk to her about how I just caught her cheating on me. I spotted her keys laying on a chair and quickly took her house key. I left her there, screaming my name. I filed for divorce and refused to speak a word to her. The best part of this whole story is that she tried to continually sleep over AP's house. But after a few days he kicked her out and said he didn't see their relationship going anywhere. It started while she was married, so it's foolish to believe that that could become anything serious or worthy of trust. Since he didn't want her anymore, she went to her aunt's for real this time. Her aunt was furious with her, reprimanding her like she was a child, in person and on social media. It was only 11 months later that my ex announced she was expecting her first child. She was not in a serious relationship and still isn't. It's been 5 years since our divorce was final and I have remarried. My wife doesn't even have a smartphone because she doesn't want to be sucked into this warped perception of reality that modern women have today. They don't know a good match when they meet one, and they are always willing to trade up as soon as they get bored. My wife knows this and refuses to do that to me. She wants to live a life comparable to her grandmother, and I admire her for that. OP, it's never acceptable for a wife to secretly meet up with another man. Even if she tells him she's going to, I think it would be best for the man to put his foot down and tell her no. What reason does a wife have to hang out or meet up with another man or men? It doesn't matter if it's a group of people. There's no reason why her husband can't be there with her. In marriage, they are one. She should never be talking to another man outside of her marriage unless he's related to her. Friendships, sometimes even between the same sex, often lead to complications in relationships. Either the woman falls for the friend of her husband or her female friend supports her in her delusional thinking. As soon as a woman gets bored in her marriage or starts to convince herself that her husband isn't meeting her expectations, there's always a woman there to tell her she's right, and she doesn't need to compromise or try to salvage the relationship. It's clear that your wife never had the confidence she found in her relationship with you. She took it and used it to start talking to your old buddy from college the moment she got bored. It's very sad that women have no idea how to commit to their man or their decisions nowadays, and are encouraged to let their emotions rule them. The best relationships and decisions are made by choice, not constant gratification. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. I'm a man, so I think I'm not that special. Therefore, I just do the work regardless of how I feel, and to make matters worse, I swallow my emotions. However, I think my case is genuinely special, so I want you guys to listen and let me know what you think. Your help will be highly appreciated. Here's my story. They say that time heals everything. Plus, they say you just need a new woman to move on. I'm now engaged and back home with my fiancé, but my anger toward my ex will just not go away that easily. I'm 39 years old already and was 18 when I met my ex, Marisol. During that time, I was a member of a Latin Kings band. I had been in that gang for 5 years and always found myself in and out of trouble. Thankfully, Marisol helped me change for the good. She was a church girl, so she was the complete opposite of what I was. We were like night and day. Somehow I thought we would complement each other. You'll understand why I was wrong. But anyway, let me explain to you how I met her. My grandma, a pious and devoted Catholic, dragged me to Sunday Mass, and when I saw Marisol, I fell in love right off the bat. I asked my cousin, who was a friend of hers, if he could introduce me to her, but he refused. He said that he didn't want me to ruin her. He was right, but she got my head in the clouds. Have you ever met someone that you wanted to make yourself better to be with? Wanted to be that man who would walk the right path. That was her. When I found out that she was going to church almost every day, I hung out by the steps, talking to her. I always walked her to and from church. She made me feel like I wasn't worthless. I forgot my love for Jesus Christ, but she was like a faith reminder to me. I felt like the Holy Spirit was invading me. On top of that, I finally gave up on gang life, got my GED, and became a regular churchgoer. One thing led to another, and we ended up dating. I couldn't stop thinking of our promising future together, away from the dangers of the gang lifestyle. However, I got unintentionally pulled back in. I was at a store and ran into someone that I used to have problems with. They were running their mouths and I tried to ignore it. I swear I did. I just let them talk, and I walked away. But then I got stabbed in the shoulder blade and lost my mind. I beat that man. I just couldn't accept this violence. Plus, I'd probably die if I didn't fight back. Anyway, I got arrested, and suddenly, it was like the things I did to make my life better vanished. Marisol was mad at me. My grandmother kept bringing up my past mistakes, and my cousin was telling me that he knew that I wasn't going to change. Those tribulations were just a God's test, I guess, but it hurt me to hear those words of unappreciation and distrust. My public defender saw me trying to better myself, and by the grace of God Almighty, got me off after a month in lockup. Despite being angry with me, Marisol visited me almost daily. I really appreciated her understanding, and for me, she was the light at the end of the tunnel. I endured that unjust imprisonment just to be with her again. A month after I got out, I found out I was going to be a father, and I didn't want my kid to have a dad that was dead or in jail. God blessed me with a son and another huge test that would tell if was a man of value or not. Only when you're forced to improve, you improve, and feeding a family and providing for your woman is a huge example of that. I didn't want to be an absent father or get killed. I did not want Marisol to become a single mom. I wanted to do good deeds, not only to seek God's pleasure, but also to thank Marisol for helping me get back to my faith and escape my former lifestyle. I saw this situation as a blessing, but I just didn't know that I would get tested even more after 9 months. I then went to a trade school to become a mechanic, and I hustled for my future family. When Luna was born, it was almost the worst day of my life. Marisol wouldn't stop bleeding. She went into shock, and they had to give her a double hysterectomy. She was in the hospital for months, and Luna became my world. I wanted her life to be the best. I wanted to give her the world. When Marisol was released, I promised her that our daughter will have a life far better than ours, and for years I kept that promise. I saved enough money to move us to the suburbs and became homeowners. I made sure Luna went to private school, knew how to defend herself, and always made sure I was the perfect husband. I didn't know my parents. Plus, I didn't have a positive male role model in my life, so I didn't know what a healthy relationship looked like. Television dads were my male role models, and I mimicked them and the marriage they had on television. As the years went by, I owned my own garage. My cousin became a pastor. My grandmother was still a pain in my neck. My relationship with my wife was stronger than ever, and I made sure I kept my prison body, but Luna hated me. Since she turned 13, she just started hating me. She didn't want me to hug her, rolled her eyes every time I told her I loved her, ignored me when I asked her about her day in school. It hurt me, and Marisol saw it. She told me that she was a teenager and that I should just let it ride. She will come back to me. For 2 years, it was like that. So for her quinceañera, I wanted to go all out, got everything she wanted, and she was still disrespectful. Briefly, the old me almost came out just to put her in her place, but instead, I went to my cousin, vented my frustration and doubts about being a good father, and he told me to just let her be, and he said a prayer for me. I wanted a slideshow for the father-daughter dance. I got a chunk of the pictures of us together, but I realized I didn't have any recent pictures of us. She didn't want to take any. The last time I had pictures of her and me smiling with me was on her 13th birthday, and those were on my daughter's broken tablet. I took that tablet, went to a repair shop, and I didn't care about the cost. I needed that tablet fixed after a day and $300. The tech fixed it, and I was happy. I knew her passcode, but I never bothered invading her privacy. I just wanted those pictures, and when I opened that tablet and looked in the gallery, there they were, my little girl smiling and happy to be with me. I felt great. Then the instant messages appeared. It was my daughter talking to my wife. It was a long banter that she didn't want me to dance with her, and it did hurt, but as my wife said, she's being a teenager. Then she said something that destroyed me. She asked why she had to do the father-daughter dance with me, since I'm not her father. I felt my heart stop, got dizzy, my mouth dried up, and I needed to sit down. My wife responded that I raised her, I loved her, and that makes me her father. But Luna responded by saying that my cousin is her father, and she can't wait for her to turn 18, so she could tell me the truth, and she could live with her real dad. That she hated me, that she thanked God that I'm not her father. Marisol began cursing her out, saying that it was a mistake for my cousin to tell her the truth 2 years ago, and the more they talked, the angrier I got. My wife lied to me for 15 years. My cousin, whom I confide my issues about Luna, and my fears about being a bad father, not only slept with my wife, but had me raise his child. I wanted to hurt them. I felt a mixture of anger, sorrow, and grief. I wanted to scream, cry, and die at the same time, if that makes any sense. Not only did I believe that my wife was faithful, the very guy who was supporting me during my tough times, my cousin was the kids. That's a double betrayal. But you know what? Revenge is a dish best served cold. It was about time to give these traitors a taste of their own medicine. I went to a dark place so I wouldn't do anything stupid. I told Marisol that I needed to focus on work so I could pay for the quinceañera, and instead I drove to Manhattan and saw my old public defender, who wasn't a low-level attorney anymore. He had a nice, expensive firm near Midtown East. I was surprised that he remembered me, but apparently I was his first case as a public defender. We sat down and I told him everything, gave him the tablet, and when he turned it on, the messages just kept coming. Only this time, Luna was talking to my cousin, her real father, and he was telling her to give me a chance. How I was always there for her, but Luna told him that so was he. How it makes sense that they have so much in common, and even called him Poppy multiple times in their conversation, and he responded and told her that she was his little girl. We went through our options, and he asked me what I wanted to do, and I told him that I wanted to go full scorched earth. I wanted to poison the well, and he asked me several times if that is what I wanted, and nodded. I also told him that everything had to be filed before the quinceañera in 2 weeks. So we sat down and spent the next 12 hours on what needed to be done, and I followed his instructions to the letter. I secretly placed my business for sale. I called the private school and told them that I will not be paying for next year. I closed the college accounts and the savings that I had for Luna and prepared to place my house for sale online. There was only one thing I deviated from: the day of the quinceañera. That day went off without a hitch. The whole family was there. Luna was smiling and having fun. Marisol kept asking me if I was okay, and I lied to her. It was hard not to hate her. She knowingly let me raise another man's child. She slept with my cousin, a man who saw me as my brother, and the godfather of my child. So the rage was hard to suppress, to say the least. When it was time for the father-daughter dance, I called her to the center of the stage. She looked annoyed, but walked over. I had the music playing, and her smile tore me apart. For years, I wanted to see that smile again, and now I didn't want it. As we danced, I had the slideshow playing. Then there were pictures of the two of us, and towards the end of the song, screenshots of her text messages with her mother and real father. My wife, the cheater, learned the hard way why the Bible criminalizes adultery, and my cousin learned the hard way why you shouldn't put your hands on another man's woman. Both acts have severe consequences. Needless to say, this didn't bode too well. Marisol looked like she saw a ghost. Luna just kept staring at the large screen, and my cousin just stared at me with fear. Marisol ran to me and told me that she could explain, and I told her that I filed for a divorce. She could explain it in court. She grabbed my arm, begging me, and I pulled back. I told Luna that I worked a lot to give her the world, and now she doesn't deserve it. I began to walk out, but not before telling my cousin that every time I see him, I'm going to knock him out. Then I knocked him out. The aftermath was harsh. Marisol and Luna were at my grandmother's apartment. Her family was shocked and disgusted with her. They wanted nothing to do with her. Her father actually apologized to me. I don't know why. He never liked me despite turning my life around. That man hated me, but now I was the perfect husband and father. But just a few days prior, I was the devil incarnate. My grandmother had the audacity to tell me about the story of Abraham, and how when came back from battle 3 years later, his wife had a 1-year-old child, and he raised him as his own, and how I should be like Abraham, so I told her to get out of my house. All those religious people were the biggest sinners on the planet in my eyes. I admit my past sins, especially the years as a gang member, but at least I gave up on that lifestyle and became a good provider and husband. In contrast, these religious individuals were nothing but traitors. She wanted to go to therapy, but I just didn't feel like it. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Plus, she thought I was overreacting. To make matters worse, she acted like she was a telenovela actress, blowing up my phone after she learned that I sold my business and I put her house on sale. To this day, I don't know what hurts the most. Being lied to by a woman who you thought was the love of your life, or having a child whose life you tried to improve and give the world, just toss you aside like trash. Fortunately, I didn't need to pay any child support, and the female judge was absolutely fair. God bless her for her understanding. I'm a man well treated by the judicial system. That's a great accomplishment. Still, I'm not over what she did. OP, you escaped a toxic lifestyle and came back to your faith. That's admirable, and you're a great example of discipline. It's natural that you reacted badly when that gangster stabbed you in the shoulder, and you should not have been put in prison. However, all this proves is that Marisol wasn't the one for you, since she cheated on you with your cousin and lied to you for 15 years. Once a cheater, always a cheater. And let's not forget your cousin. He's a traitor too. Now that you're not providing for your ex-wife and your cousin's kid, they're both contacting you and trying to make things up. Keep in mind that you've just made the right decision, and you shouldn't feel any regrets for ignoring those liars. Thank you for sharing this admirable story with us. I wish you all the best going forward. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. It's been 3 years since our divorce was finalized. Beth and I were married for nearly 18 years before our breakup. We were high school sweethearts and married shortly after graduation. At the time, we had no other lovers but each other. There is something to be said about that. It is really a good thing. Love outweighs just love any day of the week. Of course, you don't really realize it till it's too late. We led, I guess, what you might call a good life. We had 4 kids together: Amy, Brad, Carla, Daryl. We called them the alphabet kids. After Daryl was born, I had a vasectomy. I didn't want the whole alphabet. Amy and Brad are in college now, but Carla and Daryl still live with Beth, my ex-wife. What happened? What went wrong? We seemed to be a happy family. We were good parents and supported everything our kids did. We were like most young couples, struggling to make ends meet. I worked in a manufacturing plant, and Beth started working at the local Walmart store once the 2 older kids started school. The younger kids started in daycare when one of us wasn't home to watch them. It wasn't the greatest thing to do, but in today's society, that's how it goes. I often wonder how my parents and grandparents were able to do it with the women not working. I don't know whether to blame society or materialism. We wanted a lot of things and we wanted them too fast. Our love life started off great like probably most young people. We did it all the time, day or night. As the kids were born, we did it less and less. It's probably that way with most families. We just didn't have the time, or so we thought. Looking back, the problem was us. We started taking each other for granted. Our love life became a hurry up and do it. We reached our climaxes, but it was nothing like the days of old. The sweat and I love you so much type of love. In a sense, I guess it became boring, but only because we didn't put the love in it where it belonged. I eventually got a promotion to supervisor. Our financial situation became much better. As the kids became older, we were able to go out once in a while. Dinner and a movie was enjoyable. It started to put a little of the luster back into our somewhat boring relationship. I guess all marriages go through it. You love each other, but take each other for granted. Beth came home one day and said she wanted to go out with the other girls at work. I didn't see any problem with that since our kids were now old enough to take care of themselves. This happened about 4 years ago. Beth got dressed in slacks and a blouse. She looked nice. She was like a lot of women, always worried about her weight, but she always seemed to look nice at any weight. When she got home, I asked her if she had a nice time. She told me she did, and about some of the other girls. I have nothing against Walmart, but a lot of the women that worked there were divorced and separated. It didn't seem like the type of people that Beth should be partying with. I told her so, and she got mad at me for downgrading her friends. I did no such thing, I told her. It's just that these women will look for men, and you will be there with them. She looked at me a little sheepish. We were together for 18 years. I knew all her moods. I know I hit a nerve. Well, did you dance with any men? I asked. She delayed in answering me, but then said, I didn't do anything wrong. Yes, I danced with a couple of guys, and that was all. I knew a little more happened, but didn't push the issue right then. She told me that she and her friends were going to go out once a month. I wasn't really happy with it, but what could I really say? I would have to just wait and see. The following month, she wore a skirt with pantyhose. I watched her get dressed. She didn't say much to me. I told her that I would be waiting up for her. It was past midnight when she came in. She looked at me and started to go to the room to change. As she started toward the bedroom, I asked her, when you left, you had pantyhose on. Where are they? It was hot and I took them off, was all she said. Beth, this is starting to get out of hand. We need to talk, I said. She asked me to leave the room so she could undress. I told her that she had undressed in front of me for 18 years and wanted to know what was so special about that night. I walked up to her and grabbed her by the arm. It was something I had never done. Please done it, Jerry. I beg you, please done it. She knew what I was about to do as I reached under her skirt and found her pantyless. She started crying as I pushed her away. Her privates was sopping wet with another man's juices. Well, I guess that answers why no pantyhose, doesn't it? I'm sorry, Jerry. It just happened. I was drinking at this party, and Joe kept telling me how beautiful I was, and then he kissed me and began touching me. I've never been with anyone but you, Jerry. The girls kept telling me how good Joe is, and I let it happen. No one man came that much in you. You had more than one man, didn't you? I asked. When Joe took me, I was lying on the bed, and a couple of other guys came in and took advantage of me also. They didn't take you. You let them all fudge you. Doesn't our marriage mean anything to you? Didn't you at least think about me or the kids? Jerry, I'm sorry. It wasn't love like you and I have. It was raw love and I liked it. Barb, one of the other girls, is married, and she told me she and her husband are into swapping. I don't want to lose you, Jerry. Please come with me one time and try it. She begged. I needed to think. My mind was going in 100 different directions. I told her I didn't want to talk anymore right then. My mind didn't comprehend what just happened. I told her we could talk the next day. I'd sleep on the couch that night. In the morning after the kids left, I got dressed and went to work. Beth was still sleeping from her hard night. I couldn't keep my mind on my job and took the afternoon off. I went to where Beth was working and walked up to her. She smiled at me. She was a cashier that day, and at the next register was her friend Barb. I had read the name on her name tag. Honey, how come you're not at work? Her friend Barb kept eyeing me. I'm gonna see Jeff, our lawyer, today. I'm getting a divorce. I turned around and walked out. Behind me, I heard Beth yelling at me to wait. She had a customer at the register and wasn't sure what to do. I guess she was in panic mode. I didn't wait as I walked briskly out the door and got in my truck and left. I went straight to the house and packed most of my clothing. I threw it all into boxes and put it in the truck. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew where I didn't want to be. I did leave a note for my kids. I told them that their mother and I were getting a divorce, and she could explain it to them. I really would like to know how she was going to explain this one. Probably make it my fault. She was good at blaming me for most things. I ended up going to my parents' house. They were in their 60s and had been married over 40 years. I told them that Beth and I were separating and would probably get divorced. I know it hurt them because they really liked Beth and this was probably a shock. I told them I needed a place to stay, and they offered me the whole basement. It was all remodeled and had a nice bedroom, and even a small kitchenette and living room set up down there. They told me I could stay as long as I needed. They didn't much use the basement anymore. They didn't like the stairs. About 2 years ago, they moved the washer and dryer upstairs after Mom's hip replacement. I might ramble on a little while telling you this story. There's so much to tell you. I know you want to know about Beth and what the kids thought, as well as input from the lawyer and a few other people. I told Mom and Dad that Beth wanted more freedom. It was kind of hard to explain that she wanted to fudge other people. I didn't want to tell my parents that. I just told them that we felt differently about a number of things and didn't think we could come to an agreement. They weren't happy with that explanation, but that was all I could tell them for now. I did make it over to Jeff's, our lawyer, and he told me that Beth had already called twice. I asked him if he was going to represent me or her. She doesn't want a divorce, Jerry. She thinks you can work this out. Answer my question, Jeff. Are you her lawyer or mine? I asked again. I'm hers, Jerry. She called me first and I accepted the case. I'm sorry. If you would have called me, I would have been yours. Please talk with her, Jerry. You are both my friends and I hate seeing you two in divorce court. Did she tell you why I walked out, Jeff? Why I want a divorce? I asked. She said you two had an argument about her going out. She got drunk and cheated on you, he replied. Truth time, Jeff. She went out after I told her I had a bad feeling about it. She screwed 3 men and then asked me if I wanted to swap with her friends. There's your case, Jeff. I'm going to see Sally Black. We both know she's the best in the business. I'll have her call you as soon as we get a plan together. Thanks for nothing, Jeff. I turned around and walked out. Sally was the best divorce lawyer in the state. She was as hard-nosed as they come. I knew a few men who went against her and they were all taken to the cleaners. I called Sally and she gave me an appointment for the next day. She told me not to talk to Beth until we had our meeting. I asked her about the kids and she told me to have my parents call them and tell them we would talk in the next couple of days. My parents did call the kids and talk to Amy, our oldest. They told Amy that I would call them and talk to them in the next few days. They mentioned that if any of the kids had an emergency to call them, also that I would be staying at their house. About 2 hours later, Beth called the house. She told my dad she needed to talk to me. I shook my head no, and my dad said that my lawyer said not to talk to her that day. I would call her after meeting with my lawyer. I heard my dad say to Beth, Beth, I don't know what happened between you two, but you must have hurt Jerry terribly. I've never seen him like this. He talked a little more and hung up the phone. He looked over at me and said, Beth told me to tell you she loves you and not to do this to your family. I was pissed. I knew she was going to throw it in my lap, make it my fault. My mom was out of the room, so I told my dad the truth. I told him not to tell Mom because it would crush her. She loved Beth. He had tears in his eyes when he left the room. My dad was a pretty sentimental guy. I did go to work the next day. I wasn't allowed to accept personal calls in the plant except for emergencies. I told my manager about applying for a divorce and to make sure no calls were forwarded from Beth as emergencies. I was glad to be working, kept my mind focused on something other than Beth. I met with Sally after work. She was a beautiful lady, but pretty much all business. Jerry, what do you want to happen here? She asked. Wow, I guess I'm not really sure. You see, I love Beth. I really do and probably always will. I don't want to destroy her or anything like that. I just can't live with the lifestyle she wants. I'm not into sharing her and I'm not interested in having love with just anybody. I am somewhat worried about the kids. I know they're older, but I don't want her bringing every Tom, Jerk and Harry to the house. Although I don't think she would do such a thing, but I didn't think she would cheat on me either. Sally spoke. Jerry, people go through this every day. We can do whatever you want. I take it you don't want the affair situation publicly known for the sake of the kids. You need to support them and we can pretty much dictate the amount. You can give or take whatever you want. You're in the driver's seat here. We might have to use the affair as a weapon to get things settled, but we'll go for irreconcilable differences in the end. Is that all right with you? You're my lawyer. I'll follow your advice, I replied. You make a pretty hefty salary now. Since she is working, we probably can get away with $500 a week in child support. And as the kids turn 18, knock off about $50 a week. No spousal support. And when all the kids are over 18, the money stops. You will also be responsible for their medical. As far as higher education, it's up to you if you want to supply any. You don't have to legally. Your oldest is 17 and your youngest is 12. So you will have to pay some support for the next 6 years. Do you want to go with this, or do you want something else? What about our savings and my retirement package? All the savings will be divided equally, as well as any bills that are in both of your names. You have 2 vehicles, so you can each have one. Your retirement is exactly that. Your retirement. We won't let her touch that. The house and furnishings are the only things left. What would you like done with them? Our house is worth about $200,000 and we owe about $60,000, but my kids live there. I'm not sure what to do, I said. I have an idea to throw at you. In many cases like yours where you're not after revenge and there are kids involved, I suggest that you let her have the house to live in until the children are all grown and out of the house. Say age 21 for an example. At that time, the house will be sold and the money divided equally, or one of the 2 parties can buy the house at half the worth minus what's owed on it. She will be responsible for half the house payment. So much to go through. Why wasn't I enough for her? 18 screwing years down the drain. I guess we can go with that. What if either Beth or Jeff want to fight it, I asked. Then we pull out the big guns and bring up the cheating. I'm pretty sure they don't want that. If they do, then we'll ask for custody and a 50-50 split of everything, and of course no support since she won't have the kids. I took the next day off and Sally called Jeff and told him that she had an offer for him and Beth and asked if they could be at her office at noon. Of course, Jeff balked about coming to Sally's office but agreed to it, knowing it was a no-win situation for him. Jeff and Beth showed up at the same time. I figured Jeff told her to wait for him in the parking lot. There we were at the table. Sally and me on one side and Jeff and Beth on the other. Jeff spoke first. He knew Sally and wasn't happy about being on the opposite side. Nice to see you again, Sally. I know how you operate and like to get down to business. Before you make us an offer, Beth would like to talk privately with Jerry. No, I said. She did her talking the other night. I will talk to her only after the papers are signed. Everyone here is aware of why I'm asking for the divorce. I looked directly at Beth. If you're afraid of having your love life being exposed, please listen to my offer. I think it is most generous. Sally said, well, that question was answered. Mrs. Cohen, Jerry has made you a very fair offer. Sally handed a copy to Beth and one to Jeff. He will use irreconcilable differences for the reason of separation. As you can see, he has given you a decent income while your children are living at home. The only debatable issue here is the house. I think Jerry has been very fair in his offer here also. Jeff spoke again. We need time to look over this document and see about a possible counteroffer. Sally, I will talk with Beth and get back to you in the next couple of days. Jeff, just so we are clear on the issue, there will be no counteroffer. If you turn this offer down, which I believe would be very ill-advised, Mr. Cohen will file under adultery and ask for custody of the kids and the house. Beth looked up and was crying. Sally was playing hardball and it hurt me to see Beth cry. Beth grabbed a pen and asked where to sign without even reading it. She was crying full-fledged tears then. She was afraid of losing her kids. Mrs. Cohen, please calm down, replied Sally. Jerry doesn't want to hurt you or the kids. Please take a day or so, as Jeff has suggested, and see if everything is agreeable. Maybe we have overlooked something. I'm sorry about my threatening tone, but I wanted to make it clear that we are offering a very good settlement here. Jerry is seeing to it that you and your kids are well taken care of, so please take the document and discuss it with your lawyer and Jeff, and I will discuss it, say, tomorrow. Sally handed her tissue box to Beth. Allie. Beth took a couple of tissues and looked at me while her crying lessened some. Jerry, I do love you no matter what you think. I was just hoping that we could put some time between us and maybe get back together. But I see that you have already made your decision. No, Beth, you made my decision for me. You want the freedom to do as you please, and I'm giving it to you. The only thing I ask is that you keep your lovers away from my kids, or I'll take them from you. That's a promise. Beth started crying again as she hurried out of the building. Jeff said goodbye to us and told Sally he would probably see her tomorrow or the next day. Sally looked at me and told me it looked like I would win this case. I told her there are no winners, only losers. I lost the only woman I ever loved, and my kids now live in a single-parent home. No, we didn't win. We just got a fair agreement. My daughter Amy drove the two youngest over to my parents to see me. I was happy to see them. They kept asking questions, and I kept telling them that their mom and I weren't getting along, and we didn't see eye to eye on some major issues, and we would be getting divorced. I tried to explain to them that their mother and I would always be in their lives. We just wouldn't be together. Daryl, I will be at your games. I wouldn't miss them. And Carla, when volleyball season gets here, I'll be in the stands rooting for you. I will always be part of your lives. I hugged and kissed them all as they told me how much they loved me. I gave them my cell phone number, and of course they could always call me at Grandma's house. Brad showed up a little later. Dad, I have a question for you. Did you cheat on Mom? No, Brad. I would never cheat on your mother. Why would you ask me that? Well, Jim, my buddy at school, and Travis, our neighbor, said their parents are divorced, and in both cases their dad was caught cheating on their mom. I was hoping you didn't do something like that. God, I love you, Dad, and I'm going to miss you. Brad, you won't be missing me. I'm not leaving the country. I'll always be here for all you kids. It will just take some time getting used to our situation. Well, the divorce was finalized, and I kept my promise to the kids. I went to most of their school functions. I saw Beth at most of them. She was a good mom, and if she was having any affairs, she was keeping it very private. I might mention here that Beth and I were always on speaking terms. We got together for the kids' birthdays and other special occasions. The only agreement we had was she wasn't to mention her dating life to me. We talked about the kids, holidays, my parents. No topic was off limits but her love life. A couple of times she started to say something about a male friend or something along those lines, and I would get up and leave. The agreement that Sally and I wrote up we all signed. I wasn't there when Beth came in to sign it. Sally told me Beth took it pretty hard. We had a few arguments with Jeff on what credit cards would be paid and by whom. I guess that was his way of saving face. I told Sally that if push came to shove, I would pay them. We canceled all our credit cards and had new ones issued in separate names. I talked with the kids regularly. They told me that their mom accepted the fact that we were divorced and seemed a little happier. I asked them if she dated, and they told me no. She did go out with girlfriends about once a month. I think I cringed when I heard that. I never did have that heart-to-heart with Beth. She wanted the freedom to explore, and that wasn't my thought in life. You don't marry someone and decide to find new attractions. It was the way I was brought up. As I mentioned, my parents were married over 40 years. Maybe we did get married too early and she didn't get a chance for whatever it is she is seeking. I never explored the sexual realm either. I was happy with Beth. Going back a couple of years, I should mention that I did start dating again. I went out with a few women from work. At my age, most women I met and dated were divorced. I made it a point never to date a married woman, even if she was separated. I guess it's something I felt inside. I did have love with a few of these ladies. It just wasn't the same for me. I mean, it was good and I treated them all with respect, but I always thought about Beth. It's funny how you can't just shake it off and go on with your life. I tried. Believe me, I really tried. All the women I dated just didn't do it for me. My best days were the family events when I could see Beth. One night last year, I went out with the guys from work. They said they knew a noisy lounge where the women hung out. Of course you know who I saw there. It must have been ladies' night out. I looked up and there she sat. It was funny though, because there weren't any men around them yet. I didn't know any of the women she was with. The only one I ever met from her work was Barb, and she wasn't there. I walked up to Beth from the side so she didn't see me coming. "Would you like to dance?" I asked. "Jerry, what are you doing here?" she asked. "Just out with the guys." "Are you waiting for someone? Or do you want to dance?" I replied. "No. Yes. I mean, no. I'm not waiting for anyone. And yes, I'd love to dance with you. Let me introduce you to my friends." She rattled off a half-dozen names and then said, "These women all belong to our card club. About once every 6 months we go out instead of playing cards, and it just happens to be tonight. Now, how about that dance?" We went up to the dance floor and I held her in my arms. "Just like old times. Isn't it?" I said. She looked up and smiled as I pulled her tighter. We had 2 slow numbers in a row, and then the band started a fast one. "I never could dance to those type songs," I said, as I walked her back to her table. She seemed sad that I took her to the table. "Ladies, it was nice meeting you. I better get back to my friends." As I walked away, it just didn't seem right. I didn't want to see if she was approached by another man. I told my friends that I had to leave and would see them later. As I walked out the door, I turned and saw Beth staring at me. The next day, I got a call from her. She said it was nice to see me out and about and enjoyed being with me. She asked me if I would help plan Amy's wedding reception. My oldest daughter was going to get married. It seemed like just yesterday I held her in my arms. Now here she was, ready to start her life with her boyfriend. It's funny Beth called the day after I had seen her since I knew Amy's wedding was a year away. I told her I thought it was a bit early since it was so far away. She told me that reservations and such have to be made way in advance. I suggested she give Amy a call and make the plans with her. After all, it was her wedding. After they got their ideas on paper, I would look at the financial end. She said that was okay and she would give Amy a call and get things started. I wanted Beth to know that one dance does not put us back together. I called her about a month later to ask her how the plans were coming along. Carla answered the phone and said that Beth had gone out with friends. I was aggravated but really had no right to be. We've been divorced for over 2.5 years now. I did ask Carla if her mom went out regularly, and she told me about once a month. I called my buddy Pete and asked him if he wanted to go to the lounge. He was divorced also and enjoyed the ladies. We walked in and the place was crowded. I saw Beth sitting with a group of people, both men and women. I decided to heck with her. I was going to find another woman to dance with. I saw this young gal, probably around 30. She was dressed really sexy with a mini skirt on and braless. Pete said, "Darn, now that's nice. Check out those gals sitting by themselves." The gals were seated with some other women who were dressed about the same. They were only a couple of tables away from Beth and her friends. I was walking in the direction of Beth's table when she spotted me. Her mouth kind of flew open and I walked right past her table and to the table with the sexy young chick. "Care to dance?" I asked her. "Sure, I like older men, especially good-looking ones," she replied. I knew she said it loud enough that Beth heard her. We got up and I held her close. I wasn't holding her hand but had my arms around her and had her chest tight against me. "I'm Jerry and you are a very lovely woman." I was dancing almost in front of Beth's table. "I'm Rachel and it's nice to meet you, Jerry." I kept her close and tried not to look at Beth. The men at Beth's table were staring at Rachel's legs. I would pull on her skirt and give them a little more to look at. The next one was a fast song but Rachel and I stayed on the floor and danced. I knew this would get to Beth since I never danced fast songs with her. It was followed by another slow one and I grabbed Rachel and held her tight. I slid my hands down one time and squeezed her buns. She just smiled at me. At the end of the song, I walked her back to my table and told her maybe we could dance again later. Rachel replied, "I'd like that." Pete had just returned to our table also. He danced with one of the other gals who was there at the same table with Rachel. I was sipping my drink and Pete looked up and said, "Here comes a nice-looking broad." He had never met Beth, but that's who was coming to our table. "Will you dance with me?" she asked. I looked over at Pete as though she was talking to him. Jerry, answer me. I stood up and said, it would be a pleasure. I looked over at Pete and said, Pete, meet Beth, my ex-wife. Pete's mouth dropped open, remembering he had just called her a broad. As we were dancing, Beth said, what was that all about? She was all over you. God, she would have screwed you on the dance floor if you would have asked her. Isn't that why we're divorced? You wanted me to fudge other women so you could have other men? I asked. Jerry, please. You and I never did talk about it. I was wrong. Look, Beth, you came home with other men's liquid running out of you like a faucet, and all you can say is, I was wrong. Maybe I should fudge that little filly and then I can say I was wrong too. Besides, we're not married now. When you went on your fudge spree, you were my wife. My wife, darn it. Some guy came up to Beth and I on the dance floor and asked Beth what she was doing. You're supposed to be my date and you asked this guy to dance, he asked. I looked at this weasel and said, fudge off, buddy. You're not getting any off Beth tonight. I could tell it really embarrassed Beth. Who the fudge are you? Her husband or something, he asked. Yeah, I'm her husband and you're going to be in the hospital if you don't get the fudge away from us. Beth started to talk when I interrupted her. Do you want to sit with me or go back to your boyfriend here? Beth was steaming mad and pulled away from me and went back to her table. I grabbed the creep by the arm and told him if he tried having love with her that night that I would hunt him down and kill him. Then I let go of his arm as he went back to his table. The two young fillies we danced with earlier came over and sat with us. We switched over to a booth and were feeling them up. I normally don't treat women like this, but Beth had a bird's eye view and I was putting it on pretty thick. I knew Pete was finger screwing the one he was with. These gals were there for one reason that night, and that was to get laid. The little blonde I was with asked if we were ready to leave. She told us she was hot and horny. I asked her to do me a favor first. I pointed over to Beth, who was sitting there looking really mad in our direction, and I asked her to go over and tell that woman that she was going to get her wish that evening. The little blonde smiled and walked over and told Beth what I had said, and she came back. Beth was furious and tried to get up, but was trapped between some other people. By the time she got up, we were gone. We did have love with these two hot chicks at Pete's apartment. In fact, throughout the night, we even changed partners. The love was great, but after they left the next morning, I didn't feel complete. I knew what it was. The love was missing. I had turned off my cell phone, and when I turned it on, I had 10 messages from Beth. She was hot under the collar. She called me every name in the book. On one of her messages, she said I ruined her evening. That made me feel good. It was about 9 in the morning when I called her. She answered the phone, and I asked her if she was calmed down any. She began ranting and raving again, saying what a jerk I was and how much I hurt her. Then all of a sudden, she stopped. How does it feel, Beth, to know the one you love is screwing someone else? It's the life you chose. You fudge who you want and I'll fudge who I want. To heck with love. I could hear her crying as I hung up the phone. I didn't hear from her for a couple of weeks. Then one day she called. Jerry, can we talk? I mean about everything. I know it will hurt you because seeing you with that bimbo hurt me, so I know what I did was much worse. Beth, it's over now. Go on with your life and fudge who you want. I don't care anymore. I just wanted you to get a taste of how it felt. Jerry, I haven't screwed a man in 2.5 years. The last time was a month after you left me. It wasn't all that good. And there was no love. I realized that it was just men using me as a fool. I'm not a fool, Jerry. I was wrong. I was really wrong, and there is no way I can prove it to you. I wanted to try and explain it to you, but that type of life is not for me. I realized it when Joe asked me if I was his little fool. I slapped him hard across the face. He went to hit me back, but I kicked him in the balls before he had a chance. I don't want that life, Jerry. I want the life that we once had. Honest. 2.5 years. What about that idiot a couple of weeks ago? He said he was your date. He had every intention in bedding you down. He was friends of one of the guys at our table. The other men at the table were with their wives. Since I was the only single woman at the table, he assumed he was going to be with me. I had no intention of doing anything other than maybe dancing with him. Besides, he told me you were going to kill him if he laid a hand on me. Did you tell him that? I sure did. Do I have to follow up on my threat? Heck no. He wouldn't even dance with me. The only reason I went back to the table was that you embarrassed me so badly. Then you sent that bimbo over to let me know you were going to have love with her. Did you, Jerry? Did you have love with her? Beth, we're not married. I'm free to do what I want. By the way, whatever happened to your friend Barb? I don't see her with you anymore. They don't belong to the club anymore. She and her husband are divorced. The reason they tried swapping was because they thought it would add a little lust into their marriage. Her husband ended up divorcing her, and he and the other man's wife left together. 2 more marriages went down in flames. I thought it was odd she mentioned the club. She mentioned she hasn't gone there for years. I thought I'd change the subject. How are the wedding plans for Amy coming along? You haven't told me much about them, and now it's only a few months away, I asked. I know you know all the plans. Amy has talked to you a dozen times. I guess I felt you didn't want to be over here alone with me, so that's why we made the plans and just let you verify them. I'm not afraid to be alone with you, Beth, I said. Oh yeah? I don't believe you. If you're not afraid of me, then take me out on a date, she laughed. I don't think that would be a good idea, Beth. It may give the wrong impression. People might think we were getting back together, I replied. I knew you were afraid. You still love me like I love you. You just wanted to admit it, she said. Beth, I do love you, but the hurt of what you did to me is still there. I see it every time I look at you. When you cheated on me, you took a big part of my heart away. I don't think it's mended yet. I don't know if it will ever be. God, I'm so sorry, and there is nothing I can do. Nothing. Jerry, I'm the one who ruined our marriage. I'm the one who lost the only man I ever loved. I'm also living daily with the guilt. I've thought time and time again about taking my own life, but it's the kids that would have to live with that. I've done enough damage to them. I was hoping that one day maybe, just maybe, we might get back together. I didn't know what to think anymore. I never had talked to her, and now I hear this. God, my mind was in turmoil. I wanted her. I loved her. I hated what she did to me, and to our marriage. What if she followed up on her thoughts? Was she laying a guilt trip on me? I had to know more before I'd believe her. I knew I couldn't live with it if she would take her own life. I thought I knew her well enough to know if she was lying to me, but I don't know anymore. I had to find out for sure. But how? We all have thoughts like that once in a while. Thank God we don't follow through on them. I had to say something to her. But what? Beth, I'm getting hungry. Care to join me at the Red Lobster for lunch? We could discuss what we'll give Amy for a wedding present. All I heard for the next 30 seconds was crying. Then a tiny voice said, I'd love to. Now, Beth, you have to understand that this isn't for love. It's lunch and a little talk about Amy's wedding. I understand. I could almost hear her smiling. I stopped by to pick her up and she was standing on the porch waiting. God, she was beautiful. Dressed up in a nice dress that showed ample legs. I pulled up and she came almost running to the car. She got in and just smiled. We talked about generalities, avoiding the heavy stuff. She told me she had bought a dress for the wedding. She told me I better get measured for a tux. I knew I had to wear one, but I don't think any guy looks forward to it. Without thinking, I asked Beth if she would go with me to see how I looked in one. I hadn't worn one since our wedding almost 22 years ago. She looked surprised and so was I. It just came out. I was so used to asking her opinion when we were married. Yes, I'd love to come with you. Just let me know when. I could hardly take it back, so I told her the following Saturday would be fine. I would have to watch myself. I could get myself into trouble here. We were seated at the table and we both ordered iced tea. We always ordered the same stuff. We had so much in common. Beth, I need to ask you something, but I really have to know the truth. I promise after you answer, we will never discuss the topic again. Did you mean it when you talked about taking your own life? She looked at me with a tear in her eyes. Don't worry. I won't cry. I've done that enough in the last 3 years. In answer to your question, yes, I did. I told you I went out once after you left me. I know this is going to sound really stupid, but I did it for revenge against you. Revenge against me. I done unders. I was all mixed up, confused, and felt abandoned by you. I know it wasn't your fault at all, but at the time I wasn't thinking rationally. So I went out again to get even with you. I wasn't enjoying it at all, and that's when I got up to leave and he called me his fool. I slapped and kicked him and came home crying. The kids were already in bed, and I just felt my life was over. I went in and got the whole bottle of sleeping pills and was about to take them when Carla asked if she could sleep with me. She told me she needed me. I stayed crying with my little girl asleep in my arms. It's when I prayed to Almighty God for help. Calmness came over me, and I decided my kids needed me and just maybe you would see the change in my life and want me back. She brought tears to my eyes. Luckily, our meals came and we changed the subject and started eating. Afterwards, I asked her if she wanted to go to a movie. We found a good comedy so we could both laugh. I took her back home, and she asked me if I wanted to come in. I told her not then. I had a lot of thinking to do, and before she got out of the car, she leaned over and kissed me. I didn't stop her. She felt so good, like she belonged there. I love you, Jerry. Just remember that. She got out without me saying anything and went into the house. Something just didn't fit. She told me twice now that she did the swap thing only one more time a month after I left her. I wanted to believe her, but the puzzle pieces didn't fit. For one thing, if you go to a swap club, you have to have a partner. Who was hers? Couldn't be this Joe fellow because that's who she swapped to be with. Where was her man when she was fighting off his Joe fellow? Then the possible suicide. She said time and time again. Yet she only told me about the sleeping pills. I wanted to believe her, but I needed answers. My biggest problem was where she went every month and with whom for 2.5 years. The kids never mentioned meeting anybody. Maybe she was being honest with me and I was being paranoid. All our free time was spent getting ready for Amy's wedding. I did have lunch with Beth, Amy, and my son Brad and Amy's fiancé Ben. We were headed over to be fitted for our tuxes. I swear I looked like a penguin, but Amy and Beth both said I looked handsome. Time flew by so fast, and before I knew it, it was time for the wedding rehearsal. I went over to the church and did all the things I was asked to do. No big deal. As Amy and I walked down the aisle, and I did some silly things like hopping and skipping. Nothing bad, just having a little fun. I remember the pastor saying that it would be different the following day. We might be nervous, so we should try to remember our parts. I thought, yeah, walk down the aisle and later say her mom and I. Wow. I thought, who couldn't do that? Afterwards, we all went to the restaurant and ate. I made sure I went. It was something that I didn't have to pay for. Before I left to go home, Beth came up to me. I had hardly said much to her that evening. Jerry, I'll see you tomorrow. It was something about the way she said it, and I leaned over and kissed her. I don't know why, but I did. Maybe it was the joyousness of the occasion. I can't really say. She smiled at me and I left. I was at the church early, just like I was told. The bridesmaids and ushers were all there. People started arriving. I was starting to get a little jittery. Beth was being escorted to the front row. She looked so beautiful. I've never seen her more radiant as she smiled at me. How's my penguin today? She laughed lightly. He's scared shitless. His daughter is getting married and his wife never looked more beautiful, I replied. I realized what I said after I said it. It was true. I've never saw her more beautiful. It's okay, honey. Everything will work out fine. You will do fine. Just don't walk on Amy's dress. She smiled at me. I headed out to the back of the church and waited for Amy. When I saw her coming to be by my side, I started crying. She looked like a younger version of Beth. It's okay, Daddy. We can do this. Mom told me to tell you she loves you and not to step on my dress. It made me chuckle, so much like her mother. I got a little pang hoping Amy wouldn't be totally like her mother. My little girl was getting married. The music started and the bridesmaids and flower girl and everyone else had made their entrance. Well, Dad, here we go, Amy said as we entered the sanctuary of the church. We started our walk down the aisle. I kept telling myself, don't step on Amy's dress. My eyes were filled with tears as I walked my little girl down the aisle. This was what life was all about. Love and family and friends. We made it down to the front of the church with half the people with tears of joy in their eyes. Thank God I wasn't the only one. Who gives this woman to be married? The pastor asked. What was my line? Me and Beth? No, her mother and I said. I turned to sit next to Beth and she was both smiling and crying. I whispered to Beth, I screwed up. One stupid line and I screwed it up. Everything is fine, honey. You did great, Beth whispered. Through the whole service, I was holding Beth's hand, probably to the point of hurting her. She didn't say a word. She just sat there, smiling and crying. I was glad when that service was over. Then we had to stand around for pictures and whatever else they do. Then it was time for the reception. I needed a drink and went and got one. Everyone was having a good time. Amy and Ben made a nice couple. People were saying it was so nice to see me and Beth together. Every time I heard it, Beth just smiled, never saying a word. The dancing began and they had a parents of the bride dance. I guided Beth onto the floor and started dancing. People started clapping for us. I looked around at all our kids smiling. I looked over at my mom and dad and they both gave me a thumbs up. It looked like everyone was sure about us. But me. After the wedding, Beth asked me if I would drive her home. Of course I said yes. When we got to the house, she asked me if I was coming in. I answered, saying, the kids will be home shortly and I don't want them to get the wrong idea. They already have the wrong idea. They went home with your mom and dad and will be sleeping in your bed. The only place for you to sleep tonight is in my bed or Brad's. Beth replied. Are you going to open my door for me? She smiled. I decided what the heck. She wanted me and so I decided to follow my heart. I wanted to make sure I didn't propose or anything. I still had too many unanswered questions. I got out and walked her to the door. I opened it and she told me to come in. Jerry, you don't need to marry me tonight. Maybe that time will come and maybe it won't. I do want you to make love to me tonight, just like you used to. I walked in and we both slowly undressed. She is the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. She told me that's because I'm looking through love glasses. We made love that night over and over again. In the morning, we made love one more time and then she made me breakfast. Jerry, I'm not going to push you and I'm not going to rush you, but I will always be here for you as long as it takes. I smiled at Beth and left the house. I didn't even kiss her goodbye on purpose. I wanted her to know that the love was great, but I wasn't ready yet. I now had a new problem to ponder. Beth did things to me that we have never done, and yet she's been without a lover for almost 3 years now. Something was out of kilter. I knew it but couldn't put my finger on it. Everything was too nice, fit together too easy. For over 2 years, Beth never said anything about getting back together. In the last year, she was throwing herself at me. I needed to know more. When I got back to Mom and Dad's, everyone had left. Dad asked me if everything was okay because I seemed out of sorts. I explained to him that something wasn't right and I needed to find out what. Even though it was Sunday, I called Sally, my lawyer. I explained the situation and she thought it was odd also. She told me to not say anything for a couple of days. She had a private investigator who would find out what was going on. Beth called on Monday and asked me over for dinner. I told her that I was busy and would take a rain check. I had some business to take care of. I didn't tell her I was getting antsy trying to put 2 and 2 together and kept coming out with 5. On Thursday, Sally called me at work and asked me to get to her office as soon as possible. She said it was extremely important. I asked for the rest of the day off and went to see Sally. When I got there, Sally told me things I didn't want to hear. I was right about Beth. She belonged to a swap club and her partner was Jeff, her lawyer. It seems that after I walked out, Jeff decided to take my place. Beth never decided to quit her lifestyle, but hide it from me. I asked Sally why was she coming back after me in the last year. She had her freedom and her life. Why bother me? It's all about money, Jerry. In the last 3 years, she has borrowed from the home loan to the tune of $100,000. Instead of owing the $60,000, you owe $160,000, said Sally. How did she get it? Didn't she need my signature to borrow money against the house? I asked. No. When you settled on the credit cards, one was a cash equity loan. You could borrow continually on it to a specified sum. Yours is almost there now. Your friend Jeff slipped that one past us. There was no way of telling once you agreed to pay the credit loans. I'm sorry, Jerry. I should have watched that after the divorce was final. We don't usually do a follow-up unless asked, and of course Jeff wasn't going to ask. Sally, when I spent the night with her, I checked through the cabinets for her prescription drugs. There weren't any. So I called the doctor and he told me he never wrote a prescription for sleeping pills in the last 3 years and that Beth has been there for all her physicals. He said she was actually coming every 3 months instead of 6. I asked if she asked to be tested for any sexually transmitted diseases, and he told me she had the tests done and is clean. Thank God for at least that, I thought. By me paying the medical bills, I was at least able to find out this stuff. Well, Sally, what do we do now? I asked. The only debt you incurred is the house. We'll put a lien on it for $40,000, and if she ever tries to sell it, you'll get that part of the equity. The rest is a loss to you. As far as the kids go, 2 are already out of the house. The other 2 are old enough to decide if they want to live with your ex-wife, with you, or your parents. We will leave that up to them. Jerry, since you told me you will be leaving the state, you will probably out of the picture. I'm sure they would want to finish the last years of their schooling here. Thanks for everything, Sally. I guess it's all up to me now. Please call and put the freeze on the equity on the house. If the kids choose to live with my mom and dad, I'll need you to transfer the child support payment to my parents. I went home and talked to my mom and dad. I told them both that I could never go back to Beth. Even though my dad already knew, I explained it as though he didn't. Beth cheated on me, and I hoped she had given up that lifestyle, but she hadn't. If she would have been honest with me, we might have been able to work things out. I knew my parents were deeply hurt, but they needed to know the truth. I stopped by Beth's house while she was at work. I came right out and told the kids the truth. Their mom had cheated on me. I didn't tell them about swapping and the like. I tried to give her time to change, but she never did. I thought we had a chance at the wedding, but found out she was still lying to me. I could never live with her or trust her again. It just wasn't possible to forgive anymore. Now I had to tell them I was leaving the state. They could come with me, stay with their mom, or live with their grandparents. Both of the younger kids said they would stay with their mom. Even though she might have boyfriends, she never brought them to the house. Carla told me she never saw strange men at the house. About the only one to visit other than relatives was Jeff. They've known him for years. I didn't have the heart to tell them Jeff was one of her lovers. They all cried, saying they would miss me, but I explained that I would only be 5 hours away if they needed me. They would also be welcome to come and visit me anytime. When are you leaving, Dad? Asked Brad. Next week, once I get settled in, I'll give you my address and phone number. I love all of you and will help you any way I can. I called Beth at work. It was something I had never done. Beth, I'll meet you at the tavern. I need to talk with you away from the kids. She told me she got off work in an hour and would be there. I know she must have thought her plan worked and we would be getting back together. When she got there, I began our talk. Beth, I've been doing a lot of thinking. Because of Amy's wedding and making love with you, everyone is thinking we're getting back together. It's all going too fast for me. Do you know that no one knows why we got divorced in the first place? I look back on your life for the last 3 years. Where's the hurt? The pain that I felt when I discovered you're cheating? There wasn't any. Sure, your financial situation hurt some, but that was about it. She looked at me a little concerned. I continued. Our night together was the best ever. You did things to me that we have never done. I remembered you always thought it was too dirty. But there you were doing it. I had to wonder where you even learned it. Jerry, I can explain it, she said. Here's what I need you to explain. You told me you hadn't been with anyone for 2.5 years. Why did you lie to me? You had your girls' night out every month. It seems that the women you were with from work and your card club were also swap club members. So I guess you've been getting your sex in after all. She started in on her crying again. You screwing other men caused our divorce and you never stopped doing it. Go ahead, explain it. Go home and tell your kids why I left in the first place. Tell them your privates has an itch that I'm not good enough to scratch. They deserve to know and are old enough to handle it. I've talked to them. God, Jerry, surely you didn't tell them about me. Did you? She asked. It's always about you, isn't it, Beth? Never about your kids or me. I told them you had an affair and cheated on me. Jerry, I'm so sorry. You left me. What could I do? I'm a woman and need to be loved. You don't want love. What I did the other night was love. What you want is unlimited orgasms with unlimited fudge partners. Did you think I would never find out? How screwing stupid do you think I am? I had wondered what if we got married and then I caught you cheating again. Then it hit me. Your lover Jeff was behind this setup. Jeff? How did you find out about Jeff? Oh my God. What have I done? What have you done? You ruined a lot of lives, including your own. You gave up a man who truly loved you and was almost ready to go back to you. You have lost the respect of your kids, even though they will still live with you. You've hurt them all deeply. You lie, you cheat, and now you want to steal from me also. The love I had for you is still there, but buried deep in my heart. All I see now is a conniving fool who will fudge anything that walks. A couple of years from now, I want you to think about what could have been. Your looks will fade and your kids will be gone, and so will the money. I guess you will still have a bunch of old fudge friends, and of course Jeff. I doubt if he'll stay around with a poor fool. She was crying hard now. Jerry, I really do love you. Please stay with me. I'll go to therapy or whatever you want. I turned to her and said, I forgot to tell you. I'm moving out of state and leaving next week. Thanks for the goodbye fudge. You really are good in bed, but of course you know that as well as God knows how many men. Goodbye, Beth. Have a nice life. I knew Jeff was behind this setup. If I would have gotten remarried, then that meant I would have accepted her lifestyle, and our old marriage agreement would be void. She and Jeff were playing me for the last year because of the money. She was already down $100 a month and deep in debt again, but was living the same as she always did. It must mean she had run up a heck of a debt. Such a stupid woman. Epilogue. I finally moved on with my life. I hurt for a while, but I was putting it all behind me. Did I love Beth? Of course I did. But her wrongdoing was just too much. It's been a few years now and I met someone. She was a few years younger than me. Beautiful, articulate, and funny. She told me she was divorced. She had 2 kids that were barely teenagers. When I asked her what caused her divorce, she said, a cheating husband. He wanted the so-called good life. You know, the include other people's style. It wasn't for me. I'm a one-guy kind of woman. I also have to think what's best for my kids. I told him to go find a woman who thinks like that, but it wasn't me. We dated for about a year and I asked her to marry me. She looked up at me and asked what the marriage vows meant to me. To love, honor, and obey. Till death do us do part. Richer or poorer. Sickness and in health. To make love only to her and none other. I can do all that except the obey part, I laughed. She knew my story and about my alphabet kids and had to laugh. You see, her son was named Aaron and her daughter was Faith. We were married and all my kids attended the wedding. At first, they were reluctant to attend. I had them come up before the wedding and they met my future wife face to face. They saw the kind, gentle person that I saw. Of course, Amy and Brad were both married already. And Carla was dating. Daryl and Carla were both still in college. They knew I needed someone in my life. Mom and Dad drove up for the wedding also. They fell in love with my bride-to-be also. They knew my life was back on track. My wife looked beautiful, petite, and sexy as heck. Why any man would want to share her was beyond me. We went on a short honeymoon and stopped by Mom and Dad's on the way back. I showed my new wife the town I was from and the house I used to live in. Beth had to sell it because of her debts. I did get $30,000 out of it, thanks to Sally, my lawyer. We headed back home and began our new life. It was a simple life, but we were happy with it. We did enjoy it to the fullest, and our lovemaking was terrific. We had only one problem, but we were able to solve it. You see, my new wife's name was Bethany. I remember her looking at me and telling me we had to do something about that. She didn't want me to call her Beth, so we decided on Honey. She told me she didn't care what everyone else called her, but she didn't want to hear anything but the word honey from my lips. I remember asking if I could call her sweetheart once in a while. She smiled and said that would be okay too. When we make love, you can call me anything you want but Beth. She laughed. I don't know what Beth is doing anymore. I did remove her from my life. The kids see her and say she lives in an apartment alone. They said she seems to be doing okay. As far as dating goes, they think she does but doesn't really talk about it. They said she cried when she heard I was getting married. Of course they love their mom and do watch after her. She'll be all right, they said. I just hope she gave up some of the wildlife. I guess I'll never know. I remember the last thing she said to me. Jerry, I really do love you and want you to know that I will wait for you. I know you will come back to me. I'll be here for as long as it takes. My answer to her was, forever is